Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. You know, making movies is hard enough to do on a studio backlot, but imagine shooting your film in a Thai prison with real former inmates. It sounds impossible and dangerous, but that's exactly what our next guests did for their brutal, brilliantly choreographed new film, A Prayer Before Dawn. Let's take a look.
Billy, you fight?
Boxing.
Boxing มันไปชกมวยมาเว้ย
I want to train. I'm a boxer. I can show you I can fight. I need to fight.
You're first for round to qualify for national tournament. If you don't represent our prison, say it now.
I've got no family, no money. Just give me this one chance. I want to fight.
The reason why you have a rupture is because of boxing and the massive abuse of drugs. Any more trauma, you could lead to death.
That's all I've got.
You lose.
Everybody put your hands together for Jean-Stéphane Sauvaire and star Joe Cole of A Prayer Before Dawn. Congratulations, you guys, for one, getting out alive in the making of this movie. Every hit counts in this movie. Everything that happens with the body counts in this movie. It's a movie that is feels very focused and very obsessed on the body and trauma, and that happens right in the beginning of the movie when we meet our main character. What made you as a director, Jean, focus so much on the brutality and the physical aspect of it, outside of the fact that it's a boxing movie?
Yeah, it's a boxing movie, it's a prison movie, it's based on a true story of Billy Moore. And Billy is most of all a guy who is fighting with himself, against himself, who hates himself at the beginning of the film, and he's kind of violent because of his background, coming from Liverpool and a poor family, and the father who was beating him. So the only refuge, he found was to the drugs, and became an addict and went to Thailand. And there, he fought again. He was like doing boxing, but fall again into drugs and end up in prison. And I thought it was interesting trying to portray and describe, how it could be. And how visually it could be for this guy, to fight his own demons. And through the boxing, to the gang members, to the drug, to everything that can happen in this prison. So that's why for me it was more a film about bodies fighting with themselves, against themselves. He had to build his own body, and it's really a body story.
I think that's why so much of the film, or so much of that story about Billy and his backstory really comes into play much later into the film. And so much of the first act, really first half of the movie, is kind of watching Joe interact with this world and watching him figure out himself and interact with himself. And there's very little talking. I don't think we really learn his name until about halfway through the film, almost. Joe, what was it like when you got the script for this movie, when you got the pitch, and What were your first thoughts? Was it like, oh, that sounds great, let's give it a shot?
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary, the story. I found it quite hard to believe, some points of it. You know, moments where Billy escapes from prison and then comes back, and some of these things that you wouldn't write in a normal script. And then I read his book, and it was funny and sad and fascinating in equal measure. And I just really wanted to be a part of it. I saw Jean's film, earlier film, about child soldiers in Liberia, and I just knew that he was probably the right man to take this project on. And yeah, I was itching to get involved. I thought it'd be a great challenge.
What sort of conversations do the two of you have before you start shooting about trust? Because I feel like a fair amount of this movie and a fair amount of the shooting and production is going to be about how far can we take this? What's your line as an actor, and where do I want to go as a director?
Yeah, as a director, you know, when you do this kind of film, it's really a main character story. I really needed from the actor, the star of the film, to be my partner on this film. You know, it's not a film you can like do with anybody. And that was the first thing I asked him, you know, are you okay to go like as far as I want for you to go? And trust me and follow me, because it's going to be an experience. I hope it's going to be a life experience for both of us, because I like when you do a movie, you know, it becomes a life experience and not just doing a movie for doing a movie. And Joe really agree on this. I think he said, yeah, I'm ready. And I think it was the right time also for you to go into this kind of experience and movie, you know, after Peaky Blinders, all this kind of experience, you know, I think it's going to be in Thailand. It's going to be tough because you're going to have to fight every day, basically. You're going to be immersed in this kind of prison with non-professional actors, former prisoners, with a lot of experience. They're all going to wait for you. So get ready, build your body, you know, and do your body as an armor, you know, and to be ready to fight in this prison and to really like survive, you know, because it's going to be also a survival movie. So you're going to have to go through a lot of stuff, you know.
Did it feel like you were going through a bit of a survival test while shooting the movie?
Yeah. Yeah, it was full on, and I knew it was going to be like that. And I also, the great thing for me was having John leading it. It was kind of, I just had to try and match him every day, and I knew that he has a tireless work ethic and a passion for these kind of stories, and also finding real people. You know, these are serious guys who spent many years, most of their adult lives in prison. Everyone in this film, pretty much, prisoner boxers. And for me, it was just about trying to match that energy and just say, yeah, like I'm prepared to sort of, you know, live and die by the sword, I guess.
So, what was it like working with those former prisoners, those actors, non-actors, now actors?
It was really, it was amazing, actually. When I first got out to Bangkok in Thailand, I went to one of their houses. Jean used to hold casting sessions at one of the guys' houses, and he'd bring down different ex-criminals that he knew, guys who spent many years in prison, and he'd bring them down, and I went down and did improvisation kind of work with them and trying to see what would happen. And they don't speak any English. I didn't speak any Thai. And what we found was the less Thai I spoke, the less English they spoke, the more kind of interesting and fascinating these interactions were. And their imagination was just, you know, like nothing I've ever seen. They could do an improvisation in the prison for, you know, an hour. They could probably do it all day long without stopping. Because I suppose because they've had so much time in prison, probably so much time to think without, you know, social media and books and whatever else. They could just explore and fully immerse themselves, and it was quite amazing to see.
How did you meet the one man who you were doing casting sessions at his house? How did you meet him, and what was it like living in Thailand and scouting for these actors?
Yeah, I spent almost a year and a half, you know, to do this film in Thailand. I really wanted to know the culture, to understand the people before doing this film, and I really wanted to do this with people who really experience, you know, this life in prison. So The first guy I met is the one who is fighting against Joe in the middle of the film, who spent like 15 years in jail. He's covered with tattoo, he's a boxer, and he killed 3 people in jail and then got released because he became a champion, a boxing champion. So he helped me to meet like his friends, former prisoners as well. And I went to their Facebook, because now Facebook, it's great, to see all the pictures of the people. And I saw this guy, Kang, with the face covered with tattoo. And I said, this one sounds to be great, I want to meet him. And we met.
The guy who's kind of like the leader of the gang. And
the leader of the gang.
Their block, yeah.
He spent like kind of 10 years in prison, so he had this kind of experience, but got released like 6 years ago. And he's really famous on Facebook. He had like 2 million followers and stuff. So he knew a lot of people, because now he has a band and stuff. I mean, he's unfortunately back to prison. But at this time, he was out. And,
really phenomenal in the film. He's incredibly charismatic.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy, and he really helped me. He became kind of my casting director, because he invited, like, every Sunday I was going to his house, meeting, like, his old friends, former prisoners, covered with tattoos, and I was doing interviews trying to rewrite the script and get some details and story from prison, and taking some pictures, all of them, to see which one could be, like, the most photogenic. And the production company was kind of worried at the beginning because they are not actors. So they say maybe they're going to show up the first day, but they won't show up again, the next day because they can get bored and stuff. They have something to do, and stuff. I say, I think we need to build this trust. And that's what we did for 1 year, building this trust between each other. And they were like the more like dedicated people, on set. They were always on time. And very involved in this movie because I think it was important for them also to tell their own story. They don't have that many opportunities, to tell these kind of stories, and they really wanted. And I like to use, in general, the cinema as a therapy for everybody, like an art therapy, to release all the trauma and act in front of the camera. Some stuff, they always keep on themselves and release this kind of violence and rage, they can have inside. So that's how we work together, and they were like phenomenal, and I really appreciate working with them, and having them against like Joe also was fascinating, because it's always bring something different, and he gave also a lot of his own personality, and I like when an actor, can give something from himself, from his own experience, from his life experience to the character. It add much more, than when you're just like acting and not much, not giving from yourself.
Joe, these the boxing scenes in the movie are they're kind of mind blowing because most boxing movies, and I was telling you this in the green room, most boxing movies you can kind of see why the camera is in a certain place because of how they're choreographing it to make it look like a fight is happening, like make it look like people are getting hit, but it's going this way, it's going that way, add a sound effect. With this, I honestly could not tell how you choreographed it. I just felt like you were getting hit the whole time you were shooting it.
It's because I was. The nature of the way we shot it, Jean wanted to do long takes, 10-minute takes. We shot the middle fight in one go a few times. We shot the other fights, we'd shoot the whole round in one go and things like that. And that means that you don't have time to set the camera up and put it behind your head so that you can do a movie-style punch with your fist 6 inches away from your face. You have to actually hit and kick each other. So we'd do kind of open hand in the glove, which softens the punch. But also I've done quite a bit of fighting on camera as well. And I think the more you do, the better you get at controlling yourself. So I felt like I could throw a punch which connected but wasn't going to knock the guy out, and I could react to a punch at the right moment. So I would take the punch, but I wouldn't take the full weight of the punch. I could move in a way that looked like I did, but it wouldn't actually hit me.
That said, the way that you describe it still implies a kind of classic fighting style in movies, which I think is like kind of like going right and left. And with this, it's so much messier. They're not professional boxers, and they're not supposed to be. They're good, but they're not the way that we see it in movies mostly, where people are just going punch for punch very easily.
Yeah, I think, and this was something Jean said early on, but
it looks dirty, is what I'm saying.
And I think I think it was more interesting. Jean said this early on in the shoot, and he said every fight has to tell a story, and every fight has to have some emotion behind it, and this energy behind it, and it's not just about, oh, that was a good combo, you know. Whereas a lot of fight movies you watch, you go, oh yeah, he did a good combo there, cool. Whereas this, I think you watch it and you feel the emotion behind every punch. You feel what my character's feeling and what the other character's feeling, and that for us was more important. They're not champion fighters; they're prison fighters, which gives us license to do that a bit more. But it's about that animalistic, beast-like energy that Billy would have had in the ring.
And one thing that you do with the fights, you said every fight tells a story, and it does, but one thing that you avoid doing, I think, is that classic fight story of he's going to go down, he can't make it, oh, no, he's going to win, the sort of the Rocky story that happens in every boxing movie now. It's almost like you can't do a boxing movie unless you do that. And you completely avoid that in this movie, especially in one particular scene, which I'm not going to bring up, which I was shocked that you were able to avoid it. And it's so much more powerful because of it. Was that on your mind before shooting this, the sort of cliches to avoid?
You know, it's difficult when you have to do a boxing movie because there is such great boxing movie. You say, okay, how am I going to do another boxing movie? We can be slightly different, you know. So my idea was to be more realistic. And in fact, I went also to a lot of boxing fights, you know, in Bangkok, in Thailand, and trying to observe. And that it's most of the time it's messy, as you say, you know, it's and you can feel the fear, you know, in the boxers, and you can feel a lot of emotion and energy and stuff that I really want to have in this film, you know, much more than just the drama kind of steps, you know, yeah, he fall down and he finally win and stuff, but being more in a documentary way, so the camera is always inside the ring with the boxers. The DP, David Ungaro, he had to fight sometimes, you know, to find the right angle and to be between these two guys. And I wanted with the sound as well to really feel the sweat, you know, the breathing and every sound you can imagine when you are inside the ring, because the ring is kind of a small prison, you know, and his guy in the film is always locked behind the walls. And I wanted also trying to feel how it could be to be inside the ring for the audience and not just watching with a distance, but trying to be immersed and showing that boxing it's also a violent sport, you know, not just like entertaining, but it's two guys fighting with each other. So that's why, you know, we try this kind of approach, more realistic and authentic in the film in general and in this boxing scene.
Yeah. It's based on a memoir by a guy named Billy. What is his last name? Excuse me.
Moore.
Billy Moore. You play Billy Moore. Did you meet him at all before shooting? Did you talk to him before taking this on?
Yeah, I was actually filming Peaky Blinders in Liverpool before we went out to shoot this movie, where Billy's from, Liverpool in Northern England. And I spent a lot of time getting to know him. Met his mum, met his stepdad, his brothers. And it was over the course of those few months of just kind of spending time with him and hanging out and just chatting that I was able to get a real understanding of who this guy was and really realised that he was a far more complicated character than perhaps might meet the eye. You know, he's got half an ear and it looks like a bit like he's been through the mill, and he obviously has, but actually he's kind of a little boy in a man's body in a lot of ways. He's incredibly vulnerable, you know, insecure. He's obviously an addict. He's clean at the moment, but that's a daily battle. And just sort of uncovering over a period of time who this guy was very important for me for this film.
So that vulnerability and insecurity definitely comes into play with your relationship to the woman that you end up kind of dating in the movie as well. It comes out very well. Let's get some questions from the audience. Who's a question?
Hi. I was wondering what the most challenging part of acting in this film was.
I'd have to say the fights. Yeah, they were grueling because, as I said before, kind of the nature of the way we shot them, you had to almost have the endurance of a boxer in some ways, because we'd shoot for many, many hours and we'd do it over and over again all day, and we're we are making contact. So I'd probably say that. Yeah.
Did you tell your castmates on Peaky Blinders that you were going to do like a Thai boxing movie inside of a Thai prison? And what were their responses? Imagine the older actors being like, "Yeah, it sounds like a young man's game. Go ahead."
No, they're very supportive. You know, like I mean, Paul Anderson, who plays Arthur in Peaky, was actually he was a great help for me for this project, and he kind of gave me a lot of advice. But yeah, you know, I think it's just they're supportive. Yeah.
One more.
Hi. Are there any other films that influence this style of the film?
I don't really know. You know, I'm trying to figure out. So I watch, of course, a lot of prison and boxing movie and everything. But I try not to be influenced because I'm trying to do my own films about the subject. And I was more like inspired, you know, by the people I shot, you know, by Joe and by the prisoners with their own story, and than I was inspired by films. You know, it's more like by the people you have to film, which give you, you know, also like the way of like trying to do this film more like realistic and authentic and immersive. You know, I really wanted to have the audience, you know, almost watching the film as if it was in VR, virtual reality, being involved, trying to understand, you know, how it could be to end up in a prison and how we could fight the violence, you know, not just watching it, but understand the violence, different form of violence, you know, the gangs and the drugs and the boxing, trying to understand that it's not the solution, you know, to everything, that he's fighting, he is going through the violence deeply, but finally, you know, emerge kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. So for me, it was really important to show this in the movie.
Well, Jean, Joe, congratulations. It's a beautiful, brutal film. It's a massive achievement. Congratulations. How can people see
Thank
A
you.
Prayer Before Dawn? When can they see it?
It's out August 10th over here, and you can also catch it on DirecTV.
Amazing. Give them a big round of applause, guys. Congratulations.
Thank you.